to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you can get a copy of my book. I want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and we're here today with Dr. Larry O'Hara from Notes from the Borderland, borderland.co.uk. Dr. O'Hara, I have one last question for you. Now, with the situation with where the first couple of bombings were these ethnic bombings, and then the third one was a homosexual, how did the police know, or the authorities, did they ever say how they knew or suspected that he had changed his MO?
Well, no, because the police, the official police line is that they only became aware of who he was when the photograph was released on the Thursday, the day before the last bombing, and then people began sort of contacting the police, and then on Friday his name was added to a list. So in other words,
right,
the police, although we've got the names of individual police who were operationally involved, the police have never officially on the record, other than to people like the gay campaigner Peter Tatchell, who also raised it, they've never officially admitted in public that they were tracking him for the last bombing. They've not admitted that. So their argument, the official story, is that after he planted the last bomb, as one of a name on a list of 261 suspects, I think it was actually the flying squad, sort of armed police, went to his address in Hampshire at midnight, 1 a.m. in the morning, and when they opened his door, he was just a name on a list. They saw all a load of neo-Nazi propaganda all over the walls, and he said, almost, I've been expecting you. It was me. I did it on my own. So their argument is not that they picked him up while he was doing it, but that he was identified from this photo that was delayed for 12 days. That's the official story that they have come up with.
Gotcha. Okay. Now we had mentioned too off the air before we started that you were very frustrated about your work investigating this case.
Well, yeah, because some people have given us information, but I would contrast it with, say, we had the bombings in London in July 2005 at 7/7, where there's been a whole kind of industry grown up, what I would call a 7/7 cult, who variously believe that, the people who carried out the bombings didn't carry it out, or if they did, they were mind controlled, or it was, in other words, what I'm frustrated about is that there are people who would rather concentrate on blaming the security services for things there's no real evidence that they've actually done, than actually get involved in looking at things that they have done. And the key to it, and one of the reasons why we use kind of footnotes, is that all the time we need to be questioning our own, saying, well, what is the evidence that we've got for that? And there is a danger, as you probably understand, is that when you're investigating something, you'll think, right, I've got 1, 2, 3, and 5 of the jigsaw. All I'm looking for is number 4. But of course, if number 4 isn't there, it isn't there. And you have to just say at some point, well, we don't really know. But there's a danger with kind of, I divide the world between official conspiracy theorists and unofficial conspiracy theorists almost. Now, the official conspiracy theorists are, for example, the people who told us that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And then we went to war against Iraq, and it turned out that they didn't. That's a rather big conspiracy theory, for which some people, like maybe myself, think that George Bush and Tony Blair, if you're going to indict people for war crimes, then hopefully there'll be a cell available for them. But then there's the unofficial conspiracy theorists who almost believe that that the secret state has done everything, has committed unimaginable crimes, including ones that they haven't. And so in steering a course between that is the likes of ourselves, who we believe to be evidence-based, who, I'll just say another story. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of, say, of the Julian Assange WikiLeaks controversy. Well, there's an interesting thing there, which is that one of the reasons why he's holed up in the, I think it's the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK, is because he's been accused of, various sexual misdemeanors in relation to a trip to Sweden. Now, one of the newspapers that worked with WikiLeaks to bring out that information was the Guardian newspaper in the UK, which is well regarded, particularly by itself. And a lot of people the world over think that this is the paragon of liberal values and factual journalism and so on, which I've never really believed. And one of the key reporters, called Nick Davies, did a hatchet job on Julian Assange, which basically turned him from being seen as a supporter of freedom of information, exposing state crimes, into being seen as a rapist. And what I did in the magazine, in the last issue of the magazine, is I dissected Davies's take on the story and compared it with his normal supposed methods, and showed that it didn't add up. Now, I'm not defending Julian Assange's attitude towards women, but the more, which is not one I would share, but the more precise thing is, for me here, The Guardian was acting as an organ of disinformation, which was certainly in the secret state's interest, and people who wanted to rubbish WikiLeaks. But of course, trying to get people in the UK, even supporters of Julian Assange, to take it seriously, they don't, because of course none of them want to criticise The Guardian. So they're just prepared to bite the lip and put up with it and allow them to continue to get away with it, which is... but let's say frustrating. Yeah, frustrating. But in the end, the old saying goes, you've got to speak truth to power. And because we publish the magazine under our own auspices, we could certainly do with more subscribers, and we'd like to come out more often. We have a dream of being able to pay contributors, which we can't do at the moment. But, we're quite satisfied that there's value in what we do.
I share your frustration. It's so easy to get caught up in the sensationalism. You want to drum up enthusiasm for your work, and it's so easy to get caught up in that. But you got to remember, the truth is more interesting than your fantasy that you can come up with, and these wild theories and these wild speculations that get more clicks. They get more clickbait. But the truth is,
yeah. I mean, that's right. I mean, what you find is if you're looking at something and you see something that doesn't quite fit, actually what it then usually does is open a door to other possibilities that you hadn't really thought of. And one of the criticisms that is used, various criticisms of our magazine, and one of them, people say, well, it's a bit complicated. Well, you know what? Life's complicated. Life's complicated. So if we're going to reflect life, then maybe there is a degree of complexity. Then obviously we've got to try and set things out in a logical, coherent manner. But you know what? We haven't been sued yet. I think there's a moral there somewhere, because the British libel laws are a lot more open to litigants than they are in the US.
Right. It's much tougher over there. Yeah, you got it much tougher. Now, our covering of the 1999 London nail bombing. Is there anything I've left out that I've forgotten to ask you before we move on to another topic?
No. I think you've raised a lot of the relevant questions, which still need answering. Yeah.
Okay. So then, before the show, you mentioned I believe it's Garrett Williams who was found naked in a bathtub. That sounds like a good one. What do you got?
Yeah.
What do you got?
That's a good one. There's even a slight US angle there as well.
Okay, great. What do you got?
Well, he was a mathematical genius who worked for the British GCHQ, General Communications Headquarters, which is the British equivalent of the NSA in the US, and I think they exchange information and personnel. I think he had been on a job exchange in the US at some point, and just before he died, I think he went to is it a Black Hat convention to do with cyber stuff in the US?
Yeah, in Las Vegas. In Las Vegas. Yeah, I forget what it's called. Yeah,
he had visited that. And basically, what happened is that he was found. It's almost like a Sherlock Holmes mystery, really. In fact, there's a wonderful website called Sherlock Holmes and the Alderney Mystery, where they've got about 50 chapters so far, where somebody's taken the essence of this case and they've imagined Sherlock Holmes is investigating it, which is quite surreal. But essentially, he was found inside a locked bag in his bathroom with the heat turned up and all locked from the outside, and all his phones had been shaped. His sister became concerned, so he had turned up to work. He worked within walking distance of MI6. He was on secondment. He hadn't turned up to work, and so she phoned, I think, his employers, and rather than actually just send somebody around themselves, they sent the police round. The police went round. They went into the flat. They found this. The minute they realised he was somebody who was to do with the security service, they got a bit, this is a bit serious. And then, ever since then, there was an inquest, and there were various people tried to claim that he was, again, there was a sexual angle to it, that he was a homosexual. There's no evidence of that, even if he had been, so what? That he was wearing women's clothes, was in fact, he was on a fashion course. None of these clothes, I think he probably bought them in the US to sell them. And then there was a fascinating conflict between MI6, the External Security Service, and the police, because there was a policewoman who was put on the case, Jackie Sabir, who had a really good track record as a murder detective. And MI6 appointed a liaison person and she only found out at the inquest, at which point she was absolutely livid, that he had 9 computer memory sticks in his locker at work that they didn't tell her about and they didn't allow the police access to. Because that might have revealed something that went on. And we did uncover something very interesting about that case ourselves, just open source stuff, is because there was a lot of allegation about, if you look at his internet browsing history, he'd visited sites on bondage and this, that and the other, implying that it was autoerotic, that he'd locked himself in this bag.
Right.
Well, we actually contacted a number of these websites that you could contact, and with the 2 of them like kind of commercial ones, and of the 3 who replied, who you could get replies from, they all said that nobody in the police had ever even bothered contacting them. So if the state thought that he'd met somebody via one of these sites, then the obvious question is, why did they never contact them? They didn't really believe that at all. That was probably MI6 putting that about. And the other really... So then they had an expert when it came at the inquest, and this expert showed that, he couldn't have really got in the bag himself and locked it from the inside. And just after the inquest concluded, then this other so-called expert came along and used his daughter, who was a different height, to apparently lock herself in a bag, but it was in the open air, not in a bath. And of course, the interesting point, it's almost like what was missing is there were no fingerprints anywhere. Well, if you're going to, why would you, if you're going to get in a bag and you're going to